Ready to go.
Hi, welcome everybody. I'm Denise Comer from Duke University, and this is a large group writing workshop affiliated with our massive open online course titled English Composition 1, Achieving Expertise. This course is done through Duke University and in partnership with Coursera, and I'm delighted here to be among several people from the course, and we're going to workshop one person's draft of Project One in a few minutes. But first, let me turn to our participants and ask you to introduce yourself and maybe share where you are joining us from.
Hello, I'm Ignati Cherry, also known as Santa for some people, joining from Woodstock, Georgia.
Well, hello everybody. My name is Gabriel, and I'm joining you from Brazil.
Valencia here from Argentina.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us. So we are, Ignati has volunteered to have his Project One draft workshopped, and the structure we're going to use for today's workshop is to think about the criteria for Project One and then ask Ignati for anything in particular in addition that he would like us to provide feedback on. And then we will ask Ignati to read aloud his Project One draft, which we all already have copies of. We've already read the paper, but I think it's important to also read work aloud. Sometimes an author notices things that you might not otherwise when you're verbalizing your language, your written text. And then we'll spend most of our time actually providing feedback to Ignati, identifying aspects which we think are really strong that we want to maybe model or integrate into our own writing, or encourage him to build on that he might want to strengthen as he moves into the revision phase. So if we turn to the grading criteria, these are outlined in the Project One instructions, but I'll just read through them really quickly just to get them kind of present in our minds as we're reading the text. The grading criteria for our critical review included to summarize Coyle's project in his terms, to effectively use Coyle's text to support and develop your own argument, to effectively integrate evidence in the form of quotes or paraphrases, to use scholarly conventions for citing sources, including in-text citations and references, to recognize the uses and limits of Coyle's argument, to organize the review clearly, and then to revise deeply as well as edit carefully, which those pieces will be forthcoming, and then to include an effective title as well. Ignati, is there anything in addition, since you're the author and you have a particular investment in your project, is there anything else you'd like us to focus on?
Primarily the clarity of the message, and I think when I read it, you'll hear my point, both in the introduction and in the conclusion. So I want to know that the message that is in Coyle's article and in my rendition is clear.
Okay, great, thank you. And so now I'll ask you to read it aloud, and just to share with you what I'm going to do. I've already made some notes before our workshop today, but as you're reading, if I notice something, I'm not really going to take time to write a full note to myself about it, because at that point I would miss, as you're going, I'd be so busy writing my note, I would miss your reading of the next stuff. So what I've come up with is kind of a code, a personal code, like for things I have questions about, I'll put just a quick question mark in the margin, or I might circle the main point of your paper as I see it, right? So I can talk to you about that, or I might put a plus next to something that I think is really strong and great, and that way I can stay on pace with you as you read rather than falling behind. So, all right. So, are you ready to read?
Okay. I apologize for the title. I need to rethink it. That much I do know. Coyle's arrangement of, how do you pronounce his name?
I think it's Bjork. Does anyone know for sure?
No.
Bjork's study. Anyone willing to face adversity can become great. This is what Daniel Coyle shows in his chapter, The Sweet Spot. His study focuses on Everest-size amounts of talent, page 11, coming from impossible circumstances and how to adapt the process for others. He uses Robert Bjork's study from UCLA about memory and learning for his scientific data. From this study, Coyle defines deep practice as operating at the edge of your ability where you make mistakes, experiences where you're forced to slow down, make errors, and correct them, as you would walking up an ice-covered hill, page 18. Coyle's mantra throughout the chapter is deep practice brings long-term results. Coyle starts with looking into places around the world, places he calls hotbeds of talent. Each place he studied how people trained, noting obstacles that they had to overcome. He seemed condescending toward people living in impoverished locations, yet respect for those who rise above the circumstances. On page 12, he says, the 9 hotbeds I visited shared almost nothing except the happy unlikeliness of their existence. Each was a statistical impossibility, a mouse that had not only roared, but had somehow come to rule the forest. But how? These hotbeds produced world-class talent in tennis, music, top pilots, and soccer. He mostly discussed Brazilian soccer and how the tools of greatness existed in the least likely places. He started with a boy named Bruno on page 12. He focused on a single move until he perfected it. He ended the chapter talking about Bill Clifford's Brazilian soccer school. He used the game as a portrait of the process, pushing individuals toward greatness. He planted the best picture on page 25, describing high-speed movements in a confined area. The players used a small ball and heavier than the actual soccer ball, and the tennis games were smaller, consisting of 5 or 6 players per side. He said it resembled soccer if soccer were played inside of a phone booth. In facing the restrictions of their environment, their training was what Coyle called deep practice. They learned much more in less time. Another individual Coyle discussed was Jenny, a singer. On page 13, he says, she is trying to hit the big finish, in which she turns the word time into a waterfall of notes. She tries it, screws up, stops, thinks, then sings it again at a somewhat slower speed. The studio she was working in was small and had limited equipment. Her persistence, in spite of the environmental limitations, brought about musical perfection. Using another example of perfection, he discusses Edwin Link's amusing machine. People laugh at success, as a rule, because they do not understand it. Link had taken flying lessons and was more than dissatisfied with the school and the instructor, which is what spurred him to make this machine. His instructor was no backyard wannabe. He was no other than the half-brother of Charlie Chapman, Sidney Chapman. Link said in his lesson, "For the better part of an hour, we did loops and spins and buzzed everything in sight." Pages 21 and 22. All that, and not once did he get behind the controls. This is what the standard was in 1920. It took 7 years after that training for Link to make a device which would change the airline industry forever. He didn't have the equipment, the lab, or anything you might imagine to build a prototype of the flight simulator that would even become the inspiration for NASA. His blue box, page 24, not much larger than a bathtub, was built and demonstrated. Everyone laughed at his toy. The only places who considered purchasing one were circuses and amusement parks. From 1927 to 1934, there were only 2 military bases who had one. In the winter of 1934, President Roosevelt ordered U.S. Air Corps to find a solution to the deaths of the pilots. One of the officers remembered Edwin Link's marvelous ride. The real irony was when the officers waiting for Link's plane had given up waiting due to weather. Coyle describes this meeting in the following passage. At the appointed day was cloudy with zero visibility, nasty winds and driving rain. The Air Corps' commander, by now familiar with the possible outcomes of such hazards, surmised that no pilot, no matter how brave or skilled, could possibly fly in such weather. They were just leaving the field when they heard the telltale drone overhead in the clouds, steadily descending. Link's plane appeared as a ghost, materializing only a few feet above the runway, kissed down with perfect landing, and taxied up to the surprised generals. Page 23. Before the end of World War II, Link had sold over 500,000 little blue boxes, and the Air Corps became the Air Force. Pilots stopped dying in peacetime accidents. This is how Coyle used Robert Bajorque's study to validate his own findings. Coyle quotes Bajorque, we think of effortless performance as desirable, but it's a terrible way to learn." Page 18. It is true that we learn best when facing some kind of adversity. To quote Bajorque again, we tend to think of our memory as a tape recorder, but that's wrong. It's a living structure, a scaffold of nearly infinite size. The more we generate impulses, encountering and overcoming difficulties, the more scaffolding we build. The more scaffolding we build, the faster we learn. Page 19. Coyle seems at first to be addressing athletes, then other professionals. Once the reader is in the middle of the chapter, the realization that he addresses everyone hits. If we face adversity, even self-generated adversity, we learn deeper. Anyone willing to face adversity to reach their dream using deep practice, they can accomplish their dream. This is the thesis I derive from the chapter. In the words of Daniel Coyle, May we all have a shared facial expression, taunt, intense, squint, and take the unaccountable resemblance of Clint Eastwood.
Thank you very much. Okay, so now let's take 1 minute, and I have a little timer on my machine, so 1 minute of quiet time for us to collect our thoughts before we provide you feedback. And so I'll start my timer now, and I'll let you know when our 1 minute is up.
Okay.
Okay, so our minute is up. So I'm going to invite our workshop participants to start letting you know some feedback on your project. Thank you for reading again. So I'll turn to one of our participants.
So, can I begin?
Mm-hmm.
So, the first thing I thought is it's very clear, you know, he can transmit the author's intentions by his work. So I think his structure is very good. This is one of the things I can actually use and apply to my writing skills to, improve my writing skills. And I just would like to say that regarding the structure, it's well defined. It has a sequence, a very structured sequence. So he begins by explaining what it is, the practice. And then he brings the author's steps. What did the author do in his research to write the book? And then he brings the examples. And after, he, at the end, on the 3 last paragraphs, if I recall, he brings some validating evidence, so about Robert's work, which reassures the whole thesis, And I really enjoyed the last paragraph, like the quote from Clint Eastwood. I think it's a very, very nice touch.
I'll just jump in here. Thank you. Yeah, that last paragraph too, I felt like it ended on such an inspiring kind of note, right? That we all can reach our dreams, and it applies to every one of us. I agree with Gabriel. I really like that as an ending.
I wanted to leave it with people feeling better at the end.
Well, you did, man.
Florencia, were you going to add something?
That I loved the last paragraph, the conclusion, and mainly the quote that he chose to close the report with. The one about our minds not being recorders. From the point of view of a teacher, that quote was really inspiring, really touching.
And so, Ignati, something else I really appreciated about your project was how much you integrated Coyle into the text. I feel like even if I hadn't read Coyle's chapter, I would have a strong sense of what his authorial voice is like and what his prose sounds like and what his points were. I think you achieved the summarizing Coyle's project in his own terms. I think you used a lot of his own terms, and so that was successful. Let me ask the other participants, what did you take to be Ignati's point, because part of the, well, you asked yourself, right, that if the project was clear not only on what Coyle's point was, but what your point was too, and then one of the criteria is to kind of use Coyle to support your own argument. So how would you summarize Ignati's point, or what point did you get from this project?
Well, in my opinion, I think he agrees with the author. You know, the last sentence from the first paragraph, that he talks about Coyle's mantra, that is, big practice brings long-term results. Well, I think this shows his opinion and his point. And in the last paragraph again, when he finishes with that quote, I think he just kind of going back to that phrase, so let's all do this, and so we can actually obtain long-term results.
Denise, can I interrupt for just one moment?
Sure.
Amira hasn't been able to turn on her camera, but we think we have audio with her, and she'd like to jump in.
Okay, welcome, Amira. Are you there?
Uh-oh. Okay, I'll keep working with her. You guys.
Okay. All right. Well, hopefully you can join us when you get your audio ready. So, Florencia, did you have anything to add about what point you took away from the project?
Actually, Gabriel was pretty clear about what he was saying. I think that I don't remember his name. Santa was like pro Coyle's argument, and he took that and sort of concluded his essay, taking it into the real life spectrum, saying that we can apply that in our everyday life. I mean, to conquer our dreams and stuff. So it's pretty much what Gabriel said.
Okay. And Ignati, is that what you hoped to communicate in your project?
Yes, if we work toward our dreams, we can reach them.
That's so nice. Okay, so let's talk about limitations, because part of the project also asked that we identify some limitations from Coyle's project. The two that I noticed in your project that you mentioned was, one of them was in the second paragraph. You wrote a sentence, you said he seemed condescending toward people living in impoverished locations. That's one moment where I noticed you articulating a limitation. And I wasn't quite certain, but I thought another possible limitation could be coming out of your title. I was curious about your title because you said Coyle's arrangement of Bjork's study. I didn't know if you were suggesting that well, some kind of limitation or not. Were those your limitations, or did you have others that you also wanted to communicate?
Those two were primarily, the focus was he showed a condescending attitude toward people who couldn't or didn't understand what was necessary to get somewhere, and that he borrowed from Bjork to prove his point. I think, well, those are the only two that I have in this work so far.
Okay, so one suggestion I have as you're revising would be to consider expanding on those slightly, because I think I didn't know yet if there was evidence to show where you were seeing the condescension in Coyle's writing. So if you could provide a few examples of where you see him being condescending.
Well, one was the quote right after that, but it's kind of a weak example. Yes, I'll work on that.
Well, let's talk about that quote for a little bit, and maybe Gabriel and Florencia, do you see condescension in that quote, and if so, where? This is the quote from page 12 of Coyle's text, but it's in paragraph 2 of Ignati's, about the mouse, I guess.
The one with the hotbed?
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, Coil, well, coming from a country which is looked at differently most of the times, I think that Coil's being condescending quite difficult to explain in my not that cultural English. It sort of depicts Brazil as not how do you say, not a powerful country. Is that right?
Developed, perhaps.
Developed, probably. Sort of as if he thinks, as if Coil thinks that in order to succeed, you need to come from the right environment, from an empowering environment, or rather going against that. But he sort of makes a condescending remark against poor places that might not be socially, society might not believe that poor places can actually produce great talent.
So that might be something that you want to include, right? That he kind of operates from, I think it's like an assumption, right? That he's surprised by talent in these places. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
That how can so much come from a people that have
So little.
yes, so little going for them, and more than that, he tends to look at the hotbeds as being not quite up to his standard.
Right.
I'll work on that.
Okay. And what do you think, you readers here, Gabriela and Florencia, where do you think he should put that? Because I was thinking about Gabriel's comment about the structure, right? And it is very clear. I have a really strong sense of what the purpose of each paragraph is, right? And you named some of those initially, right? That the first paragraph, by the way, does a great job, I think, of offering a real concise overview of Coil's main argument. So I think that's really strong in introducing his key terms. That's really good. Then you move into the paragraph that's the condescension that we're suggesting you consider expanding on. But then you move back to the examples that Coil draws on. Do you all think that that's the strongest structure for this, or would you suggest moving something around?
Well, yeah, you're the teacher. I don't know. I think it's fine by me, you know.
What I was trying to do is get the negative out of the way and then show the positive.
Mm-hmm.
I understand.
So
why? I'm curious.
the way I think, I guess. It's just, okay, this is what I saw that wasn't that good. Okay, I'm done with it. Let's go with the real stuff. Or really the focus of the paper is not what's wrong with Coil, but the message that he has.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I want the focus to be throughout the paper.
Well, then I would say that your structure is probably exactly right for that, because often kind of the position of emphasis is what you spend the most time with and where it occurs in a project, right? So, yeah, so I see. So you're saying while he has some condescending approaches and attitudes and some, or you're reading some of that into his text, right? The larger message is really valuable nonetheless, right? And so,
Yes.
So maybe if you, as you expand that second paragraph a bit, if you could offer a transition sentence that said exactly what you just said to us, that would help me understand why you made that choice about the structure.
Denise, can I jump in for just one moment?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be Amira's voice. So she's sending me texts, and I'll speak out loud what she wants to share. She's written just some general comments that I think has already kind of come up in the discussion, but it'll probably emphasize the kind of feedback that you're getting, Ignati. She wanted to point out that the structure is very coherent, and she really liked it. She thought it was great also that Ignati quoted so many lines from the chapter to support his ideas that made it really clear what was happening in relationship to Coyle's own words. Her one concern is that it seems to be more summary than critical review. And I think we're talking about that already a little bit, about upping the critical part or the limitation of Coyle's. She'd like to see you talk maybe about Coyle's methodology as one way to reflect on how to discuss him in a negative isn't necessarily the best way to put it, but a critical way. I hope I got your words right, Amir.
Thank you, Elise, for reading it. Thank you, Amir. I'm sorry we can't hear you, but at least you did a good job. Yeah, those are so. What do you think about including the methods, Coyle's methods?
I think it's a good idea, personally. I'll work on that. That's something that I hadn't considered, looking into the methodology and really bringing it out.
Okay. Are there other comments or aspects of the project that either of you noticed, any of you noticed, that you wanted to bring out in feedback?
Well, now that Denise or Amira brought that up about the summary, I think Ignati, shows his position, but in just tiny parts of the text, So perhaps if you could, at least in my opinion, if you could point that out more, more in the text, I think perhaps it should improve improve it.
Francia?
I agree with Gabriel. I mean, he has a point there. It could have more agnostic points of view and less, well, maybe not less quotes because it's awesome the way it is, but maybe some personal points of view.
Yeah, I agree. I'd like to hear more about what you think throughout. Let's imagine that Ignati is trying to stay within the suggested word limit, though, and then so we're telling him to add a bunch of stuff, and so what's he going to do, because he has parameters that he has to work within. All writers always have parameters. So are there portions of the summary that you have identified that you think he might be able to kind of either reduce or eliminate that are less central than others?
As he was reading, I noticed that it was quite long, the part where he mentions links, examples, the one with the NASA and stuff. I would probably reduce that or even take it out so that he can have more space to give his points of view as regards the previous quotes that he included.
Yeah, I agree with that. Perhaps there are some information that might have put in that is just not essential,
Yeah, I think the way I would approach it is I would think, is there a purpose for talking about all three of his examples? Is there a discrete purpose for raising each of the three examples, right? Or could you raise it in one sentence and then expand on one example and achieve your purpose of illustrating something? And so that's something that you would need to decide, but maybe you've already, the reason you're bringing up these examples to my mind is to show that Coyle is primarily talking about matters of athletics and, well, I guess as I'm talking, I think.
Well, if I may, perhaps he just brings more examples to illustrate that Coyle's thesis works in not only in one area, but in all sorts of things. So I know he primarily talks about sports, soccer, but it works for other things as well.
But maybe I can take this idea and summarize the rest in a sentence or two rather than expanding on each example. Just use a sentence or two for the other examples and keep the sports part as he does in his article.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what people are thinking?
Yeah, I think that it would be, better,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the paragraph where you say Coyle seems at first to be addressing athletes, then other professionals. I mean, that's really the key point that's bringing you to the conclusion that you are ultimately moving towards, right? That any of us, right, whether we're in, NASA or with singers or athletes, like whatever we do, teachers, lawyers, we can use deep practice.
Or learning how to tell children that their dreams are okay.
Exactly. I did just want to mention one thing about the citation. What school of citation are you adhering to? Are you using MLA, APA?
Well, I'm using MLA, but I did not complete the citation at the end. And I think I need to, I'm not sure about the page indicators just being in parentheses.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's take as an example the first paragraph. You have your third sentence. His study focuses on, and then you quote, Everest-sized amounts of talent, and then you have a parentheses of 11. That is correct because you want to identify that this came from page 11 of Coyle's text. The only small tweak, according to MLA format, would be that the comma that you have after talent should technically go after the ending parentheses of the page 11.
Okay.
Okay. So where you have a parentheses around 18 later on in that paragraph, that's exactly right because you have the punctuation on the outside of the parentheses. Okay. In the second paragraph, about midway through, we see on page 12, he says, and I would encourage you that since MLA allows for the parenthetical citation, you don't have to spend your precious words saying on page 12, right? You could introduce that quote in a way that, for example, you can see condescension in the way that he refers to, people in a mouse, right? As a mouse is maybe a condescending kind of term, right, or metaphor. So that would be a way of introducing the quote that you don't have to spend with the page number, and then just at the end you can put the page number in parentheses.
Okay.
Okay. And so the same with throughout. I think whenever you refer to on page 12 or on page 25, I think just move those to parentheses.
Okay.
So are there any other aspects of feedback that any of you would like to provide? Amira, you too, if you have something additional to write in for Elise, you can. Or Florencia or Gabriel.
Well, I don't know. Oh, but one thing. About the limitations of let's say, how can you apply this thesis? So I remember I saw somebody putting on a forum discussion about, for example, philosophy. How can you apply this to philosophy or things like that? So I think it might be a little more complicated, and I don't know if you thought about that, Ignati.
I think I remember the post you're talking about even. I did think about it, and I'm not sure how with philosophy you can use...
It's complicated.
There are ways, obviously. I mean, like the monks and the people that really practice deep learning in adverse situations, they are learning philosophy, if you will. And deep practice, but that's something that you're right. It's very complicated.
Yeah, for if you're talking about something that it's not like, for example, math, it's not objective. Yeah, it kind of gets complicated. In my opinion, I cannot think of a way to actually apply this thesis to something like that. What do you think, Denise?
Well, I'm thinking about it in terms of with the writing project. I'm hesitating because all of us seemed to really like your conclusion so much, because it really was sort of this universal applicability, right? That no matter what your dream, right, even if it's a dream to be, a philosopher, right? Then you can use this. At the same time, what I think Gabriel is referring to is what I would call kind of qualification, right? That when we make an argument or a statement, often we need to kind of qualify that by saying, not really hedging, but by saying, recognizing that it's most things in life and most arguments in life are not going to be applicable across the board all the time, and there are always extenuating circumstances and qualifications that we need to think about. So the trick for you, Ignati, is going to be to figure out a way to retain that kind of inspiration and applicability that we saw in your final paragraph, and yet somehow integrate a little bit of qualification there. Not that you need to name every moment where it wouldn't apply, but that you need maybe to acknowledge that there might be some kinds of dreams where it seems more readily applicable than others, or more easily applicable, but the message that most of us can take away, or many people can take away, things like that are small qualifiers. Would that, Gabriel, address what you were noticing?
That's it. Perhaps just raise the question, and let the reader think for himself.
Which is a really great technique too, to kind of leave a writing project exactly like you said, getting the reader to be thinking for him or herself. Because that's how academic conversations are continued.
Yeah, because this way, you're actually trying to apply the thesis, because you have to think. So there's an obstacle, perhaps, I don't know. And you might use the practice to actually try to find an answer. I don't know if you understood me.
Yeah, I did. Ignati, what do you think?
I'm taking it under advisement.
He's worried about crushing a dream of a child sometime, right? So, all right, good. So, nice. Anybody else have anything else to add before we? I did say before we adjourned, I wanted to do one more small thing, but any more feedback for Ignati before we move to the very small next segment? Okay, Ignati, do you have any final questions for us or points of clarification that you'd like?
I'm thinking. I'm not sure. I could have written probably 3,000 or 4,000 word essay on this subject, because that's what I work hard at knowing, how to maintain dreams, how to give people inspiration, how to always be positive, and that's my goal all the way through. I think this accomplishes it, but I need to do a lot of work to make it fit the criteria that you have given me, and I appreciate it a lot.
Well, good. I'm glad, but I do want to say, I mean, I think we all did respond to that kind of inspirational, motivation that you value, and that resonated with us, because I think that's the moment when your authenticity came through, right? This is what you care about, and you're finding a way to communicate that within the criteria. Good. So if I could ask all of us, and I'm writing these projects too, so I'm going to be doing the same thing, but if we could each take just a minute, and I'll set my little timer again, and each of us kind of write just for yourselves, some ideas about your own drafts. Ignati, I guess you can just summarize the feedback that you got or where your thinking is right now based on our feedback. But for Gabriel and Florencia and Amira, based on having workshops, Ignati's paper, and read his project draft, what are you going to now do for your own project draft to continue to revise it? Okay, so I'll set our timer for a minute, and then maybe if each of you could just share one thing that you learned from the workshop at the end, that would be great. So our timer is about to go, and it starts now for 1 minute. Okay, so our minute has expired. If each of you could just name one thing that I know you maybe learned a lot, but just one thing that you want to share from having workshopped. It's really important that we emphasize that workshopping people's writing and responding to other writers helps us become stronger writers too. Of course, we hope that we helped advance your project, Ignati, but we are also all writers, so this is why it's important. So, Florencia, do you want to start with us with sharing what you learned?
Yeah, what I take from today's workshop is that I need to have to show clearly my point of view as regards Coyle's argument, and whenever I choose a quotation, to probably come through with my personal opinions to let the reader see what is it that I think, where I stand as regards Coyle's point of view.
Thank you, Gabriel.
Well, I think the thing I liked the most was the structure. It has a well-established sequence, a smooth sequence, and I think I can take this and improve and put it into my work and improve it. And one thing I liked very much, it was this positive, this inspirational touch you gave, Ignati. It's very nice, very nice. You did a great job, man.
Thank you.
Elise, did Amira write in anything?
Yes, she did. She wanted to comment on the use of citations. She usually uses APA, and I think, Denise, your description of how to use citations in MLA, she understands now what the difference is between the two, because she hadn't used MLA before.
Great. And again, I mean, you can still use APA, of course, right? So it's I am encouraging everyone in the class to use the school of citation that's most relevant for your field of inquiry or your profession, or kind of what's most often used for you, so it's most useful. And I'll just add that today I really liked what you said about the structure that you chose. I think my inclination might have been to summarize Coyle and then have the material about the limitations after that, but I really appreciated that you deliberately chose your structure based on your kind of overarching sensibility, right? That you wanted to be more positive than negative, and that the positive was more important for you as a takeaway. So it reaffirms that there shouldn't be a set structure, right? That the structure needs to kind of emerge organically from who you are as a writer and what your primary aims are in a writing project.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so thank you so much. I do want to I want to commend all of you for having participated in this and given your time and feedback, and especially to Ignati. It's very courageous and brave to be willing to share your writing with the world, and all of us are at certain points, but especially you today, so thank you so much.
Well, it's only a small audience of what, 60,000 people?
I think we're up to 71,000 now.
Okay.
I'll tell you that over 100 are watching you live right now, and a lot more will watch you later.
Hi,
Gee,
everybody out there. Thanks for joining us.
big auditorium.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much, and you know, continue to happy writing. Good luck with your drafts and writing as you continue. Thank you.
Thank you a lot, Denise. Thank you for the
Thank you.
opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah, it was awesome meeting you guys.
I'm honored that I was picked.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.